So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! The NFL Draft is just 10 days away, meaning we have just 10 days to wrap up the rest of this NFL Draft class, talk about the rest of the rookies that we want to cover, and talk about the construction of the Detroit Lions roster. So today, we're going to take full advantage of that, and we are going to do yet another 2024 mock draft simulation, taking a look at yet another way the Detroit Lions can build this roster differently, yet another way they can construct this roster for the future, and yet another way that Brad Holmes may approach the NFL draft. So with that being said, today we're going to start off with the 29th overall pick with a very polarizing prospect in this class. Some people really love him and some people absolutely hate him. Many people believe he should be a top 20 pick and some people believe he shouldn't even be a first round selection at all. And that player, as you can see from the thumbnail, is of course going to be Chop Robinson at 29. Now, Chop Robinson is, in my opinion, very comparable to a guy like Trayvon Walker from a couple of years ago. A phenomenal athlete, great athletic testing numbers, great on paper, but not necessarily having the production you would want out of a top-tier talent in the NFL draft. Chop Robinson stands at 6'3", 245 pounds with a 9.72 RAS score, meaning he is one of the best athletes in this class. With elite grades, with explosiveness, speed, and agility, and having the quickest first step in the class, Chop Robinson is a very good prospect. He's a very fun prospect to watch, and I do believe because of the first step, he will be one of the premier pass rushers from this draft class. Now, is he the most well-rounded player in this draft? No. Is he the best run defender in this class? No. Is he the most technically refined player, have the best mechanics in this class? No. But he does have phenomenal athletic ability, obviously being out of Penn State. He has, as I said, the best first step in this entire class. He is the quickest off the line of every pass rusher in the draft, especially of the first round prospects. And I do think that will aid to him being quite a strong pass rusher in the league. And a lot of people are going to say his run defending is really poor. I don't think it's necessarily something to be concerned about. And while I don't think it's necessarily the strength of his game, I don't think he's going to be a player that other teams necessarily run at because he's bad at it. More so run at because Aiden Hutchinson is quite good at it. But the Detroit Lions already have a top-tier run defense in the NFL. So adding somebody with a little bit more upside as a pass rusher makes more sense to me than sticking with the run grades. Now, taking a look at Chop Robinson statistically last year, he did have just 4 sacks and 7.5 tackles for loss, but I think the PFF grade shows a little more of what Chop Robinson's all about, as he recorded a 90.9 PFF grade from last year with 18 hurries, 5 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and a pass defended. He took a majority of his snaps last year outside the tackle, meaning he is a pure pass rusher. And even though he's not nearly as big as Aiden Hutchinson, he is still 6'3". He is still a really good size for the edge rushing position. And while I don't think, again, his run stopping ability is the thing that will get him drafted, I don't think it's going to be something that will hurt his draft stock significantly in this process. Now, with that being said, I do think he is a little less well-rounded than some of the other prospects, which is why I think Latu and Turner and Verse will all go ahead of him in the draft. But if you're talking about a guy as a pure pass rusher, as an athlete with some upside, I think he compares really well to a guy like Trayvon Walker, who in year one might only have 4 to 5 sacks, might not be the most productive on the stat sheet, but will get you a lot of pressures, will be versatile in a defense, and can be a great contributor. And then going into year two can be a guy that potentially gets you 8, 10, 11 sacks and fully turns into the prospect you want to develop. And with the new defensive line coach the Lions have brought in, I think it would be a great opportunity to pair a great ball of clay prospect, a great athlete with such a great coach. and I think it's going to be a match made in heaven. Now, going down to the next pick in this draft, we're actually going to have a trade. As at the 61st overall pick, the New England Patriots wanted to move up for wide receiver Jalen Polk, and they wanted the 61st pick as well as the 2025 7th round selection. And in return, the Lions would fall 8 spots to pick 68, but also acquire pick 137 in the exchange. So the Lions did that. I decided to take that trade. I thought it was a very reasonable trade. We move back 8 spots, but we get a 5th round selection in return. And with that 68th overall pick, I have the Detroit Lions yet again sticking on the defensive line and taking interior defensive lineman Brandon Dorless. Number 3 from Oregon was phenomenal last year. Again, 6'3", 283 pounds. So the same height as Chop Robinson, but a little bit heavier with an 8.65 RAS score with elite speed grades and great explosiveness grades. Brandon Dorless is a really, really good athlete. And even though some people have him as an edge rusher in this class, he really isn't. Even though a lot of mock draft simulators will say he is an edge rusher, and you might be asking, why take 2 edges in back-to-back at the top of your class? Brandon Dorless actually played a majority of his snaps on the interior of the defensive line at Oregon last year, as in almost 500 snaps, he played just 160 on the outside, meaning he does have the versatility to do it, but for a majority of the time, they either had him directly over the tackle or they had him on the interior of the offensive line, as I think that is where he is the most effective. Now, again, last year, he wasn't the most productive player for Oregon on the stat sheet, having just 5 sacks, 6.5 tackles for loss, did have 9 passes defended and a fumble recovery, while having 35 hurries and 7 quarterback hits. This is another player that I think is more athlete than product right now. I think he's going to take a lot of molding and a lot of developing, but the Lions just went out and they got a brand new defensive line coach, one that Dan Campbell has called numerous times the best defensive line coach in the NFL, a defensive line coach that potentially could be getting defensive coordinator looks at some point in his future. So why not take advantage of your elite talent right now? Why not take advantage of the top tier coaching ability you're going to have in this moment, in this season, and for the next couple of seasons, and get a couple of prospects, get a couple of projects, get some guys that are athletes but could turn into elite playmakers in the NFL? Because if they work out, you're going to have 2 really good, really young, extremely athletic defensive linemen to rush the passer. And if it doesn't work out, I still think as a day one floor starters, these are 2 guys that can be rotational pieces, guys that can be effective. And even if they stick as the prospects that they are, even if they don't develop very much in the slightest, I still think they would be worth the 29th and 68th overall picks, respectively. Brandon Dorless kind of shores up that interior defensive line, a little bit of a Josh Paschal type of player, but I think putting him on the interior with, Paschal and with the Lee McNeil on the interior, it's a really good trio of interior rushers, and I think he would be a great addition to the interior as well. Moving to pick 73, I have the Detroit Lions going to the offensive line, selecting Christian Mahogany, the 6'3", 314-pound offensive lineman from Boston College with a 9.63 RAS score with elite explosiveness, speed, and agility. He is one of the best athletes at the guard position in this draft, and actually a couple of years ago was named a second-team, I believe, All-American in the NCAA. Now, last season, he played over 862 snaps for the Eagles of Boston College. 422 of those were pass blocking snaps. In those 422 pass blocking snaps, Christian Mahogany allowed 0 sacks, 0 hits, and just 7 quarterback hurries on the season. Now, Boston College was not a great program last year. Boston College certainly had their issues, but Christian Mahogany was a bright spot on that offense and is a 3rd-round pick, a long-term guard solution. I think could be a plug-and-play starter on day 1, but obviously likely won't do that because of Kevin Zeitler and because of Graham Glasgow currently in those positions. Christian Mahogany will be a day 2, a year 2 starter, if that, but I think once he gets the opportunity, you're going to have 3 to 4 years of just a great player, a great prospect, and a plug-and-play starter at 73 that could be a really, really strong contributor for years to come. A much cheaper option, and I think potentially a really strong option at that for a long-term guard position. Dropping down to pick 137, cornerback was very much still a need, and I wanted to pick up one of my favorite sleepers in this class in Jaren Jones. Jaren Jones is 5'11", 190 pounds with a 9.61 RAS score with elite speed, explosiveness, and some really, really strong versatility. I think he is the most underrated cornerback in this class. I have a mid to high second day grade on him as a cornerback because from what I've seen, he has been elite for a couple of years now. Last season recorded a 90.1 Pro Football Focus grade, playing 394 snaps in the slot. He allowed just a 50% completion percentage, 158 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, while having a passer rating allowed of just 25.3. But you might be asking, well, Brian Branch is in the slot, and we really don't need that slot guy unless it's an injury player, which at 137, I would argue is still a pretty good value, even for a backup slot cornerback. But it gets better because in 2022, on 376 snaps on the boundary, Jaren Jones was even better, allowing a 45% completion percentage, 114 yards through the air, 0 touchdowns to 1 interception, with a passer rating allowed of just 42.7. So not only can he play in the slot and fill in for Brian Branch if an injury does arise, giving some more versatility to the defense, allowing him to play slot and Brian Branch to play as a deep safety, but he also gives you the opportunity that if there's an injury to the boundary cornerback position, or if he potentially goes in and wins it outright, that he could potentially be the starting boundary cornerback across from Carlton Davis. I think this guy has inside-outside versatility. He's a really good athlete. He is super feisty, super scrappy for the football, tackles really well, is a great slot defender, is a great boundary defender, and will be a great addition to the Aaron Glenn defense for many, many years. Going down to pick 164, I have the Detroit Lions selecting another project, another athlete over a product with Christian Boyd, the defensive tackle from UNI. Now, Christian Boyd is a player that was actually the first player to be brought in for a top 30 visit by the Detroit Lions this offseason. With an 89 PFF grade from his season ago, but just 3 sacks on the year, he is very much a prospect. He is very much a project, but is not going to be a polished one at the beginning of his career. He had 9 hits last year, 28 hurries, but only 1 pass is defended. He's named at 6'4", 317 pounds. And although he looks like he has the frame and the potential to be an elite athlete, his RAS score actually says a very opposite story. He had a very poor RAS score, very poor athletic testing, but the talent is there. There are a lot of people very high on Christian Boyd this year, and even though I don't think he's going to be an immediate playmaker right away, I do think this is a player that could potentially be a great player in 2 to 3 seasons. And again, with your top defensive line coach joining the roster, you have 3 guys now for him to mold, to develop, and odds are he's going to hit on at least 2, if not 3 of these guys, and give you a very strong, very young, revamped defensive line that, let's be honest, could really use the work in the 2024 season and could really use some upgrades from 2023. Moving on to day 3 and moving on to the 7th or 6th round, whatever 201 is at. With the 201st pick, I have the Detroit Lions selecting Trey Taylor, a 6 foot, 213-pound safety who athletically is good but not great. A 4.5 speed kind of guy, 37.5-inch vert, a 10'3" broad jump, but having a 90.1 Pro Football Focus coverage grade. He's a great player in coverage with some great agility, with some great closing speed, although his 40 time may not indicate that, and some really good instincts in coverage. Last season and really over his career, Trey Taylor had 13 passes defended, 6 interceptions, 2.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 205 tackles, and 1 forced fumble. He is a do-it-all safety that can go get the ball in the air, as well as stepping up to make some tough tackles in the box for running backs, as well as wide receivers to prevent yak. I think day 1, he'd be a great special teams player for the Lions, be a great 4th safety option with the departure of Taylor, with the departure of Tracy Walker, and I think he would be a really, really strong player at that for the Lions. A great special teams guy, kind of replacing that Chase Lucas-esque player, as well as having the potential to be a really good depth option as well. At 205, I wanted to hit the wide receiver market. I know the Detroit Lions kind of are still looking for that wide receiver one, and unfortunately through a lot of these draft classes, we haven't really found that guy up top, as I think Xavier Leggett is a little bit rich to be a first-round pick, but I also don't see him falling to that 61 or 68 overall spot late into the 2nd round. He will likely go between 33 and 45 in a pick that the Lions simply don't have without a trade back, and as the draft goes on, wide receiver never really seems to become the value over other positions of need and other positions that just simply need more requirements. So With that being said, at 205, I want to bring in a player that the Lions have shown interest in this year in Anthony Gold. The 5'8", 174-pound wide receiver might not jump off the page from you from a size standpoint, but for a player that runs a 4.39 40-yard dash, a 39.5-inch vert, and a 10'9" broad jump, he has elite speed, elite explosion, and elite speed and elite explosion for a player of his size. His yak ability is really good. His hands are really strong. His route running is really good. He is super, super tough after the catch. And he reminds me a little bit of an Amon-Ra St. Brown when he was coming out of USC, except this Amon-Ra St. Brown is about 3 inches shorter, but runs a 4.39 40-yard dash. A speedster, a field stretcher. Last season with the Beavers had 44 receptions, 718 yards, 2 touchdowns, while averaging 16.3 yards per reception. Being a punt returner as well could be the long-term replacement for Khalif Raymond, who's getting up there in age, be a younger option, a cheaper option, and again, I think could be a great special teams addition on day one and potentially have some packages thrown in as well to utilize that 4.3 speed to stretch the field. And then with the final pick in the draft, with pick 249, the Lions address the kicker position. You can all stop yelling at me now. Joshua Cardi is the selection, although I don't necessarily think he will be there at 249. I do think there's a chance that this is a kicker with the last spot or potentially signing the guy from the Michigan Panthers. But Joshua Cardi has a 98.6 career extra point make percentage as well as an 85% field goal make percentage on his career. His long is 61, so he has the leg to hit pretty much every kick on the field, has the accuracy that you're looking for in a kicker. And even though kickers are kind of a hit or miss thing coming out of college, I think Joshua Cardi is the most sure thing of the kickers in this class as far as sure things go for the kicker. So with all of that being said, that is my mock draft for today. I think we're going to do one more before the NFL draft officially starts, maybe one the day before the NFL draft. So in about 9 days or so, really let this one simmer for a bit. But it's more of a draft of potential than a draft of day one production, right? Shop Robinson is a project. Brandon Dorless is a project. Christian Boyd is a project. I think even Anthony Gold is a little bit of a project. And you have a couple of special teams contributors. Anthony Gold, Trey Taylor. I think Jaren Jones is a great special teams guy. Day one with some versatility on both the inside and the outside, like I said. The only real day one plug-and-play starter is Christian Mahogany, but I do think Dorless and Robinson and Jones and potentially even Boyd could have some impact on day one and have some good things to contribute to the team. So with all of that being said, that is all for you guys today. That is my latest 7-round mock draft of the Detroit Lions. Let me know what you would change. Let me know how you feel about this class. I would imagine a lot of people are going to have some negative things to say because they're not all great players from day one, but I do trust the coaching staff to develop these athletes, and I trust them to put the best players in the best positions to succeed. So with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know your opinions in the comments down below. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.